Hey neighbors, I bought a best-selling tarot deck and we're going to go through and see if we actually enjoy it. Let's go! I recently bought the Linestrider Tarot deck. Came recommended as one of the best tarot decks that they have available. The box is gorgeous, it has really pretty art on the front of it, and I wanted to go through and actually see if it's great. If you enjoy content like that, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's go! This deck comes, I already took the plastic off of this, but this box is actually really nice. It's like a almost waxy seal, but you can see all the different watercolor details on it. And it's even got a nice little synopsis and detail on the back. We're going to go ahead and open it. It's got a magnetic clasp right here. Really nice watercolor detail painted in here, and then it goes right into the book that we use. The nice little ribbon to pull that out. The cards themselves feel pretty thin. They still have the same waxy feeling that the deck box does. They're very reasonably sized. They fit right into the palm of your hand. Let's hope that the lighting picks them up. They're all going to have a nice watercolory design to them, and this like ink blot Rorschach, that's what they're called, a Rorschach design on the back. So let's go through. They're very simple. The design just seems really easy, very clean. The colors kind of sit really nicely on this white background, and it seems to have a very just soft, artistic design to them. The colors are really vibrant though, and it looks like each card has a different base color that they draw the rest on top of. I ended up getting this deck because I really liked the design on the front right here, this watercolor, and I wanted to see if that carried through the rest of the deck, and it honestly doesn't look terrible. They're just very different than what I was expecting. But I do like the fact that it's very ink blotty. Oh, this one's really different because it doesn't have, like all the other ones have this color splash behind them, but this one doesn't really seem to have that. It's just colored in the actual image. And then we're back to it. None of them really seem to be catching my attention. I like the basic design, but for the most part it just seems like it's a really average deck, which is interesting because I believe this deck was like $35. $30 is what it says on the box. See that these are very animal heavy, and the watercolor kind of fades out, so you've got some more traditional watercolor design with this like ink blot blending going on, and then others that are very, the color is kept in one specific area. It's kind of all over the place with the way that it's drawn out, but the symbolism is still there. It's still pretty easy to see. I don't know. I feel like it's different depending on the card, because some of them seem humanoid, some of them don't. Like the fantasy in this just doesn't really make sense to me. I don't quite understand the direction that it's going with the cards, and I think that's where the guidebook is going to come into play to help explain it better. Lots of cats to start out here. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a really specific theme through these cards, that it doesn't seem to rely on, you know, a specific trend in each suit, the way that they're drawing things. Like the art styles change. I mean, the line structure is the same for each one, but the watercolor and the way that the colors are dispersed in here seems different based on each card, which is very interesting. I mean, I find that hard to connect with because I want to be able to understand and see the similarities in the cards to kind of build a connection when I'm reading them, but I don't really get it in this. So it looks like the front card from the box is the Queen of Cups. Honestly, this is my favorite card that I've seen so far just because I love the way that this blends in with it. I'm not gonna lie, I was expecting more from this deck. The way the art was done on the box and the price point for it and everything, I honestly expected like a higher quality paper or a different presentation. Like this is the Eight of Swords, but there's no swords in it. Like it's just rope and blend. I mean, yes, you can get it from this because as we've talked in previous videos, the Eight of Swords represents being like stuck and blinded to the options by your own actions. So she's blindfolded and sitting in there, but there's no other imagery in it. So I feel like this deck isn't really going to be easy. Yeah, and this is another one that we talked about previously. This is the Nightmare card, the Nine of Swords, and there's no indication of the struggle of the nightmares of going through their own torture. It's just a fox under the moon. So if you're not very familiar with the tarot deck and its basis, I don't think that this would be an easy deck for you to work with. It is pretty, like the watercolor is a really nice touch to it, but it doesn't have a whole lot. I'm not really understanding what the artist was going for in this, so I don't really know how to gauge it and see what I would use this deck for. Deck also seems very classic in the art style. The line drawing and everything that it has in there seems more realistic in its style and drawing, kind of like the original Rider Waite Smith. It just looks like they took a normal art or a sense of realism and then added the watercolor on top of it, because it doesn't really feel super fantastical. It doesn't feel like there's any, you know, magic storyline or anything with this. This all just looks like art that was painted and assigned to these cards. I'm kind of struggling with the fact that a lot of these don't have their suit in them. So there's no, if you weren't to memorize what card this was, there's no indication of what you're doing. And that's not to say that other decks, because obviously I've reviewed the Nameless Tarot, and the Nameless Tarot didn't have anything on it. It was just the image and there was no suit. Like, you'd have to memorize that. But that one felt like you're memorizing it and you're seeing it and there's more of a connection to it because of the art that was drawn on it. Whereas this one, just, I don't get that. It's just art. And you have to learn what to do with it from there. So that's the whole deck. I'm honestly not super impressed. I expected more from this. I really did. These just kind of seem at random of what the artist wanted to do, and I'm not really understanding the connection between it. So if I had to go do our grading system here, the cards, the quality of them feels really like, I feel like shuffling this would be really easy, but the cards could break down pretty easy. So I'm gonna say like a 4 out of 10 for these. I'm not a big fan. I do enjoy the art, so I want to give like a 6 or a 7 on how these are drawn out, because they are pretty to look at, but I wouldn't normally think that these are tarot decks. So this deck is just not really doing too hot. I expected significantly more from it. The lady at the store said that this deck was gorgeous and that she couldn't recommend it enough, but I'm honestly wondering now, is that a true thing, or is it just, you know, you're trying to get rid of the deck? But again, I haven't worked with it. This is just through initial walkthrough. The book is actually pretty big, if you see here, and that one has a similar feel for the paper. It's also kind of waxy. Has about the deck, handling the deck, major, minor, the suits, and then a conclusion. Dances on the edge of magic and logic, animals and human, conscious and unconscious. But it just feels very bland to me, so I don't really know if I agree with all of this. And then it looks like each card has a full page of the image on it, and then the keywords description, what the story indicates, and then the correspondences for astrology, numbers, and then the associated plants. But I don't feel like it's a good explanation for a beginner. So if you are just getting into tarot, this is not a deck that I would recommend. This is more of an aesthetic deck, something that if you appreciate the art style. After taking a second actually going through and reading some of the book, the artist does go in and explain why they drew what they drew. I don't necessarily agree with all of it though. Like, as I showed when we went through the deck, the Eight of Swords doesn't have the swords in it, and that's something that I feel the card should. They should have the suit that they're representative or something hinting to them, because if you don't know tarot, you're not going to know that this is the typical depiction. Eight of Swords is a woman who's bound and blindfolded, but it's shown in this card. So how would you know and associate those without memorizing what this artist specifically did? So you can't do any like blind readings or anything from this deck, which I don't necessarily encourage you to do blind readings for everything. But when you're just starting to work with the deck, you have to find some way to build a connection, and going off of the familiarities, or at least the basic like understanding of what the suit should be standard through all of tarot, and this one just doesn't give me that. However, there is a depiction in here where the artist talks about what the card traditionally shows and then why they decided to go with this and the difference in there, so I can understand it. Same thing with the Nine of Swords. When I went through this one, I specifically said this is known as the Nightmare card, although I don't get it from here. And then if the first sentence of this says the Nine of Swords is sometimes called the Nightmare card, and then it explains the depiction of why the artist went this way. However, art is always up for interpretation, and I didn't interpret this the same way. I don't see what the artist is describing in here until I read through everything. I don't know if I necessarily agree with everything the artist did in here, but I do respect their art style, and I do think that they are a very talented artist. It just doesn't connect with me on the level that I want a tarot deck to, so I'm rather disappointed in that. Or less disappointed, and I expected more. This deck kind of missed the mark for me. If you want something that's a little more abstract, a little more artist-driven and different, this might be a good deck for you. Now that this deck is finally gone through and we've walked through everything, I'm going to pan over to regular video Ryan so that we can discuss our final thoughts on this deck, and you can decide if it's a deck that you'd like to get. If you made it this far in the video, it is time to select what the deck is going to be for our next video that we're going to film. I have a few different decks for us to choose from. I have the Steampunk Tarot, the Field Guide to Garden Dragons, the Deviant Moon Tarot, the traditional manga tarot, and then the Witch's Tarot mini deck. So make sure that you vote in the comments on which one that you would like to see, and follow us on Instagram where the poll will also be there as well. Alright, some final thoughts. I have some not nice things to say about the deck, but some great things to say about the artist. Ultimately, the things that I said previously about this deck when I was reviewing it the first time, I still hold true, but I did go to Siolo's website, and I loved their work. They have another deck, the Otherkin Tarot. They also have the Hedge Witch, I believe, Tarot, which seems, or Oracle, which is purely based in botanicals, and that's something I'm really interested in. I would love to look into their other work as far as Oracle decks go, because they have more of a free form mentality with it, and then you can appreciate their art and their interpretations because it's purely whatever they felt like creating. Whereas this deck, I feel, wants to be true to traditional tarot, but doesn't quite hit the mark for me. I think it's beautiful. I think their artwork is stunning, and I can understand why this is a best-selling deck. However, I've worked with decks that I find nicer. I've worked with decks that have higher quality print and higher quality cards, so I'm being a bit more critical about the way that that is presented, because I don't think $30 is bad for a tarot deck. I don't think it's terribly expensive, but I do think it costs more than an average starter deck, and I would consider this just a really aesthetic starter deck. Especially because you have to learn everything this way, that this artist wanted it done, versus being able to just go in and understand these are the traditional Rider Waite Smith depictions. I really do think that their work is stunning on their website, and I think that they have a lot of talent in everything they do, and I just don't think it's showcased well in such a small art form. I would love to see this more in prints. I would love to see this more on bigger things, because the details in it I don't think lend themselves to how tiny these cards are. But again, that could go into, had they used a bigger card or a better quality card, maybe we would get to see more off of it. So all in all, I stand by everything that I said about this deck, and I'm gonna say it's like a 5 out of 10 for me. I understand why people love it. I just really wanted more from it based on how everyone talked about it and the things that I had heard. But this is also a blind reading. I went into this I checked everything with knowing nothing about the artist. Now that I understand more about the artist, I like it more. And I definitely appreciate everything they put into it. Who knows, in a month or two when I come back and do another review of this deck after having worked with it, I may change how I feel about it. And if that's something that you want to see, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I try to post new tarot content every week and a few other fun crafty things in between. Thanks for unboxing this deck with me. We'll see you next week for our new tarot video, and make sure that you write in the comments which deck you want us to unbox. Bye, neighbors!